So it occurred to me that I've never actually done a how to trim a brisket video, so we're gonna do that today. I've got a 17-pound prime brisket, love that. We're gonna trim quite a bit off today, but don't worry, we're gonna use those trimmings later for sausage and burgers. So fear not, it will look like an aggressive trim, but that will help us get a nice compact shape that's gonna cook much more evenly than if we just leave it like this. So to get it started, the first thing we want to do is get our meat as cold as possible. I put this one in the freezer for about 30-45 minutes. Could have gone a little bit longer, but that's going to help us as we slice into the fat, which can often be like stringy and kind of slippery and that kind of stuff. So you want it to be as cold as possible. I probably could have left this one in just a little bit longer, but I didn't want to get the ice cubes that sometimes I deal with. So meat cold makes it easier. We're gonna start on the fat side, but the first thing I do here to help me kind of set up for success on the other side is go for this deckle fat. Now there's two ways to do this. You can either just trim it straight down so you have a nice aerodynamic kind of like shape here, or you can kind of go in here and pull out this deckle. And I tell you, the answer for me on that one is basically, am I doing a bunch at a time or am I just doing one or two? If I'm just doing a low amount, I'll usually go in and cut this bad boy out and kind of get it so that, you know, I'm getting all the fat out here. It's really hard fat. It's not going to render super well inside of this brisket cook, so you want to cut it off. But if I'm doing a bunch, I'm just shaving it down to get a nice aerodynamic shape. You can see here, big piece of the deckle here that we're getting out of there. And this leaves kind of a more like convex shape here. So I'm just gonna smooth this out and then we're gonna flip it over and start trimming the fat while it's still cold. We're gonna come back to this, but first I wanna start on this side. Okay, things that we're looking for here, a lot of hard fat, a lot of weird fat. We wanna trim this down to about 1/4 inch of fat all the way across. The reason why we do that is because if you cook it without trimming it down, you get these big globules of fat, and that's where your seasoning's on top of, and most people are just gonna cut that off. So why waste the brisket? Let's get a nice even layer of fat, because fat is flavor when done properly. That way you're not wasting brisket, you're not wasting seasoning, like you're eating the maximum amount of this brisket as possible. So this piece right here, like you can see here, it's just kind of all over the place. So I'm actually gonna start with this. I'm gonna trim this down a little bit. Now there's this big pocket of fat here that I'm gonna deal with as well. But in the meantime, obviously I'm just gonna trim all this down and get a nice shape going here. So some of the things I'm gonna look for here is I'm gonna cut this big heel off here. We don't need that. Super hard. I'm gonna kind of gently guide it. I can just tell from experience that this one's gonna have a big heel of fat. Haven't even gotten to the brisket yet, but that's gonna be great sausage fat right there. So a couple things I'm gonna do here is, again, see this big, I have this big pocket of fat right here, which is awesome for later use, but it's not gonna help us out right now. This is kind of a weird brisket shape, but I'm gonna show you. Yeah, this is all fat. Great fat. Now we want our brisket. You can see that that was all a huge pocket of fat. So I'm gonna continue to kind of like make this aerodynamic. Okay. One of the things I'm gonna do now is the kind of like the scariest part of when you're first cutting briskets is, you know, if you ever take your brisket and just put it on the smoker, that's fine. But the problem is that this side is much thinner and will obviously cook and or burn much faster than the rest of the brisket. So you have to do a pretty aggressive cut and it will look something like this. Now the other thing about this is like when I'm gonna cut here, you're gonna see it's a lot of very lean meat. So we're gonna kind of cut some of that out, which is, again, great meat. But, okay, I'm kind of doing this not the way I would normally one hand this, but what we're looking for here is we want a brisket with a consistency of about your thumb. So everybody's like, but what about all that meat? I'm making that into burgers and sausages. Now, if we come to the side here, you can see the width of my thumb or a little bigger. I don't know if you can see that. Thumb. Okay, so I'm gonna keep that there. You can see we've got some more stuff to cut down here, but that big cut right there, that kind of like is a scary thing to do the first time. I remember the first time I was told to do that, I was kind of freaking out, but that really does help create a nice, evenly cooked brisket. So we're gonna keep trimming this down and get it to where we can have it aerodynamic with only a controlled amount of fat. The other thing I'm gonna do on this side is in a cleanup method is I'm gonna take all this off on the side just because I like a nice clean edge. It also tells you how much fat you have on there as it is. So this one is a much more conservative cut. I'm only cutting off the part that has that little bit of scoring on there. That scoring or that oxidation. It's a good method to help you see how much fat you've got going, which you'll see in a second. Again, nice. This one here, again, very conservative cuts. I only want to cut off what's absolutely necessary on this side. And you can see that, well, I'll clean that up a little bit. That's basically just the scoring part that I'm taking out. So now I want to trim this down so we've got about 1/4 of an inch all the way across the brisket. Easiest way to do this is you want to go kind of like this way with it in order to help your strokes be even, and it just makes for just kind of facilitates a better cutting experience going with the grain this way. Okay, that's pretty close to the thickness that I want, and it's basically that close all the way around. Sometimes I check this because it can be like a little stringy, and I'll trim like the top layer off, but that really depends on kind of like the fat profile of the day, depending on what kind of brisket it's getting. So I'm actually okay with that. I'm not gonna worry too much about it today. I'm gonna clean up this back section a little bit. And sometimes on briskets, you'll see that like you're not really sure how much you have. Sometimes it's kind of deceiving where it looks like it's a big pocket of fat, but really it's just a little bit of fat and a big hump of meat. What you can do, and like sometimes I'll just kind of like slice it and peel it apart and see how deep I'm going. It'll kind of glue itself back together once you start cooking it. But that is a good way that I have found. It's like, okay, well, you know what? I still got a little bit too much fat here. Or I don't want to cut any more fat because I'm right there at the edge and I don't want to get down to the meat so soon. So a little pro tip there. It'll glue itself back together as you're cooking. So here we go. We got our fat cap side basically done. I'll check it again in a minute, see how we did. Let's get some of this fat down while it's still going well. This right here, I will usually cut off a little bit here. Again, like if it's just already got kind of like some scoring from the factory or the market, I'm gonna kind of pull that off a little bit, as well as help giving it a little bit of an aerodynamic shape. The other reason why I trim the fat side first is because a lot of times you'll have a lot of fat down here in the thin part, and you're just gonna end up cutting it off anyway. So you waste a lot of your fat being cold time if you're working on the meat side first. Again, this part right here, you can do as much or as little as you want. If I'm cooking a bunch, I'm a little bit more kind of like liberal in how much I'm trimming here. Like I won't do as much trimming on this part here. But if you're doing a backyard cooking for the family, I'll spend a few more minutes on here simply because I want to get a lot of good smoke penetration, season penetration, and I don't want anything to be in the way. So I think that people often undersalt their briskets, honestly, because it's instinctual not to oversalt or to put too much salt on something, which is good especially if you have high blood pressure. But the only downside is that when you kind of salt as if it were like a thin steak, you don't get a lot of that good salt penetration. So I tend to salt a little bit heavier because it's going to be on the smoker. I want it all in there. And there are different schools of thought as to the benefits of salting and seasoning the night before, but I always season right before I put it on. So when you're planning out your briskets, if you have a tight schedule, I highly recommend doing the trimming the night before. Wrap it up in some heavy duty foil, put it in the fridge, and then season right before you put it on the smoker. Because everything takes longer the day that you're smoking. Everything. It's like giving a dog a bath. As soon as they get out of the bath, they're the fastest and slipperiest dog you've ever had, no matter how they are the rest of the time. Everything takes longer on the day you're cooking, obviously. So trim it up, put it in the fridge, and then season it like right before you put it on the smoker. So my order of operations is I trim all the briskets the night before, I wake up early, get the fires going, get all that stuff going, let that come up to temp, and then while that's coming up to temp, I then season. Because usually I have more than one or two things, but I guarantee you, if you do that, you will always have like a much more streamlined process. And I assure you that your day will go better if you're starting your brisket for an evening cook. Get your meat on by 4 or 5. It needs to be on the grate at 5, which means your smoker needs to be temped and ready to go by 4 or 5. So 4 is better, obviously. Get up at 3, 3:30, bite the bullet, get the fires going. I promise you, your day will go better. And the reason why is because the meat can always rest longer. But if it's not done, it's not done. And then people are holding plates waiting to eat, and you're just like, sorry guys, it's not done, and then you're rushing, and then you don't have time for resting, or you're resting, you don't have like enough time for resting. You need to plan your brisket to have at least a 2-hour rest, if at all possible. So again, 5 o'clock latest, let the meat touch the smoker grates at 4. Little sermon there, but I promise you your day will go better. So trim the night before, season the morning of, and you will be good to go. And you're also trying to trim out here so that you don't have any hard edges, because hard edges burn. So you want a lot of aerodynamic goal here. You want it to be something that the air is just gonna flow over. All right, now that we've done this brisket was a little over 17 pounds when we took it out of the package. So let's take a quick measurement of the brisket after it's been trimmed. One last thing, I am gonna leave this here. It's a little bit pointier than I'd like, but again, I want as much brisket as possible. So, okay, let's weigh this out. We are left with just under 10 pounds at 9 pounds, 12.5 ounces. 10 pounds would have been 916. So we are right in the butter zone, because this is going to produce a 5 to 7 pound brisket, depending on how it cooked and how much intermuscular marbling there was. This is a perfect size in my opinion. So we should have a perfect 5 to 6 pound brisket when we're finished with this. And that's exactly the right size you want. So now I'm gonna wrap this in tin foil. I'm gonna get up in the morning, season it and smoke it. Hopefully this helped. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching this how to trim a block trim style brisket. Have a great one, guys. See you soon.